Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special dialogue, Hanako Murakami, Simon Baker, as a part of visual art program with Japan Society, from here to there. My name is Yuki Kamiya, Gallery Director. I'm extremely excited to have two speakers today who are both in Paris, France. Artist Hanako Murakami and the specialist of photography, Simon Baker. We originally planned to invite two of them at one place to have discussion in person. However, because of the current worldwide pandemic, Hanako and Simon are two different locations, at the studio and at the office. So we connect their conversation on virtual platform. Our series of program from here to there, it started as a testing ground for artistic practice and dialogue beyond physical distance. So this time, this event became another attempt to invite all of you to share the dialogue together. Please let me introduce today's guest speakers. Simon Baker has been director of MEP, Maison Européenne de la Photographie, Paris, since 2018. He was formerly senior curator, international art photography at Tate, London. Having been appointed Tate first curator of photography in 2009, he organized various exhibitions, including wonderful Japanese artist Daido Moriyama. Prior to this, he was associate professor of art history at Nottingham University. He has published widely on both photography and history of art, including the monograph George Conder, Thames of Hudson 2015. Recent publications on photography include essay on Coco Captain, Mari Katayama, and Elwin Wong. Another speaker, artist Hanako Murakami, studied literature from the University of Tokyo. Then she received her MA from the Tokyo University of Arts. She continued her study in Belgium, then moved to France, where she lives now. Many of Murakami's previous work were produced based on her in-depth research of historical media, such as alternative photographic technique. Each of those works were often accompanied by text written by Murakami. For the current online project at Japan Society, she combined all those media, alternative photography and text on virtual platform, as her new experiment. So let's start the event. During the streaming, please feel free to write your comments and questions to Q&A chat. We are going to respond to you. Please also visit our website, japansociety.org, to experience the ongoing online program From Here to There, which you can see special project by Hanako. Thank you again for all your support to realize this event. And now, please join me welcoming Hanako Murakami and Simon Baker.
Hi, I'm Simon Baker. I'm director of the MEP in Paris, and I want to thank the Japan Society in New York for inviting me to talk with Hanako Murakami today. Very, very excited for our conversation. And I thought for those of you who haven't seen Hanako's work before or come across it, that we would just begin very generally, just a question about how you began your career as an artist and your background, and because your work is very special and includes very many different elements, I thought it would be interesting to hear a little bit about your background and how you became an artist.
So hello, I'm Hanako. I'm very pleased. So thank you for having me here. And yeah, so to answer your question, I don't know where to begin, but maybe a little bit about my background. It's so first, I'm not really like from in an art school from the beginning. I was first studying philosophy. More precisely, I was studying aesthetics at the University of Tokyo, and then I had a chance to have some workshop to make projects on using film images, and that's how I entered a little bit in the practice side.
And when you were, because we're going to talk about your work in a minute, but now your work is very much concerned with questions around photography. It's not kind of photography, but questions around photography. How did that interest develop? How did you find yourself so fascinated by photographic questions and kind of technical questions?
Yeah, because I think I was feeling that there was a gap between what I read about images and what I see on as artworks in museums, for example, and so maybe I wanted to fill the gap.
And was that something particularly of your generation in Japan at that time, that these kinds of questions were coming out very strongly, or was it just you by yourself?
I don't know, but I think maybe we belong in generations which experienced lots of changing on the relationship with the images. So maybe it's a time period of lots of changing about how you receive the images.
And it seems to me that you kind of bridge interest in photography and philosophy by thinking about kind of conceptual art practices. Is that something that you were looking at, like Japanese conceptual practice or Western conceptual practice, kind of at that time?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. It's like, yeah.
I mean, maybe an easier way to ask the question is which kind of artists were inspiring you? The people that you were looking at and thinking, I'd like to make this kind of work.
Yeah, but I think that's your first question. I think it's a very interesting question to think about, because when I spent 1 year at the United States back in 2018, so I spent like 6 months in the Getty Center and 6 months at the George Eastman House Museum. So so first, when before being accepted as a resident, I needed to present my what I want to do during that residency. And when I explained my intent of the project, one of the people in the museum was telling me that that should be a very Japanese point of view on the photography. And I was so surprised, because I thought I've been more on like a very much I spent much years in Europe, and also studied aesthetics and philosophy. So I thought I was more impregnated in Western way of thinking, but apparently there are Japanese point of view in my project, in a way, and that's something that I shouldn't think more about it.
Well, I want to move on to talk about some of your previous works, and I wanted to start with a little story, which is, I think, nice. That you're the second Japanese artist that I know who works on photography who's obsessed with Niépce, who's the inventor of one of the inventors of photography. The first one is Daido Moriyama, who is obviously a very well-known photographer all over the world, and who has I think I told you this when we met at your studio. He has a reproduction of one of his first pictures hanging over his bed in his house, and he takes a picture of that picture every morning, and he starts his day with thinking about what was the first photograph and what will be the next photograph that he will make. And so maybe there is something a bit Japanese in the sense that I think many people in France maybe forgot about Niépce, but we're, thanks to some great Japanese artists, we can remember a little bit better. So for those people who are watching, Niépce was one of the people who contributed to the beginning of photography globally, and he's believed to, I'll let Hanako talk about him a bit more, but he's believed to be the person who made the first image which exists today, which is credited with being photographic, an image out of a window from his house in Saint-Lô-de-Varennes. And now there's a museum of Niépce in Saint-Lô-de-Varennes in France. And I think this idea of the very, very beginning of photography and the very first time that somebody managed to fix an image on a surface using just light and chemicals is a really wonderful, very poetic and very moving story in a way. And I wanted to ask you, Hanako, to talk a little bit about Niépce, because you've made so many, you've made some beautiful projects about Niépce and about the beginning of photography. I wondered if you could tell us how you became fascinated by Niépce, and then maybe talk us through some of your works that you made.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was a very natural approach to be interested into the work of Niépce, because it's the very beginning of photography, and since photography is a technique, there is an invention, and when there is an invention, there should be always a beginning. But the more interesting point is that the very beginning point is not single but plural, and it's not. There are several different point of start, and there is always different possibilities of stories of how photography began, and that's the most fascinating point about Niépce, and that's how I began to be interested into it.
There's just for our viewers, there's a wonderful book by Jeffrey Batchen called Burning with Desire, which tells the story that you've referred to, which is all of the many different places and ways in which photography kind of arrived, that it has these multiple origin points, as you say, that there were people in France who thought they'd invented photography, I think in Britain, in Brazil, and there were people who invented photography who never got never became famous, and some who became very, very famous. So Niépce is the person that we all think of as this kind of, if there is an origin point, it's probably him, right? So maybe you can show us some of the works that you made around Niépce, some of your earlier work. You had a couple of projects which I loved when we visited your studio that you had made about Niépce, 2 or 3, I think.
So this is the works that I presented in Arles last in the summer 2019. And so the title was Conception, because it's about the conception of photography. And my work about Niépce was the one on the center. And this was, so it's a conservation boxes used in every museums. And it's in the box, I made some stickers in the box. It's explaining all the test plates that Niépce was making while he was inventing photography. And so there is like 133 essays that he made, but so one of the surviving plates is the very famous Point de vue de Gras, which was photographed by Daido Moriyama. But when we read through the notes and the correspondences by Niépce, we can see that he made lots of different other essays. And so, those essays were lost. But I wanted to make a place, so a physical place for those essays. And that's why I made those boxes.
So it's kind of imaginary storage, imagining if these works had survived.
Yeah.
If the works had survived and they still were in the world today, they might be stored like this.
Yeah.
In fact, they don't. So we don't know what they look like or how were they. But you told me before that actually there was quite a lot of information. He had written quite a lot about each image, right?
Yes, so he's describing the material, and he's describing how did he took the image, and also what was the motif. It can be like a pigeon, la volière, like where you put birds, or or it can be a copy of a portrait. It can be lots of things, and you can have detailed information about that, but you don't have the actual image that were lost. So it's like but since it's lost, I just wanted to give them a place to exist.
It's like you're taking care of lots of things that don't exist.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's like the little prince asking for give me a sheep, and you give only the box.
Yeah.
So that you can imagine how was that first image.
And he was one thing I wanted to ask you about. We can talk about some of the other works, but he was experimenting because photography didn't exist yet. They didn't know which chemicals worked and which chemicals didn't work. So he was trying many different chemicals, right?
Yeah, and yes, and I think, and that's also part of his the big part of his activity of noting what kind of chemicals he was using, and he shared that with his correspondence.
There's something I wanted to ask you, because Niépce, to me, he never seemed very interested in the camera. He seemed much more to be concerned with the material support, so that
yes,
metal or paper, and what were the chemicals. And actually, yourself, you don't seem to be very interested in cameras either, which is interesting for somebody who works with photography.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm interested too. But But Niépce does have some interesting camera because he was corresponding with camera makers, and he was asking to make special camera for himself. But maybe if there is one point that I share is that I'm more interested in what doesn't exist now in the market.
Yeah.
Because if you use cameras that you can buy right now on the store, it means that you are buying a product. And when you buy a product and use a product, it means that you are a consumer of a product. But if you make something just by yourself for yourself, you'll be the only one that can use that.
And
so
sorry, go on.
Yeah. So I think in a way it's that's how you can develop another potential that was not exploited before.
In a minute, I want to ask you about your printing and how you started working with chemicals and printing. But just before that, I just wanted to ask you about the text pieces, because you work a lot with text. And you showed us behind you, you have this beautiful piece, Nomenclature. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your interest in text, because it's really interesting to me, and something that I think people may be interested to hear, because it's also to do with this kind of early moment where photography doesn't quite exist yet.
It's a work called Nomenclature, and which means it's a name of the photography before being named photography. So when I read the correspondences by Niépce, I figured out one moment that when the photography was about to be invented, the inventors were had to find a name for the invention, and so inventing the photography was also inventing putting a name on the invention. So at first it was experience, and second, point de vue, copie de gravure, reproduction spontanée, etc., etc.
So you've very nicely done it in French, just for in case any people in case any of our audience didn't read French. So you have experience is the same, point of view, copy of an engraving, like kind of engraving copy, spontaneous reproduction, which is a really beautiful one, representation, process, heliography is light writing, or sun writing, literally. So it's lots of very beautiful kind of ideas about what does it mean for, because there was something very interesting at the beginning of photography where people would say something like, the world has made an image of itself on the surface, as if it was kind of automatic or spontaneous.
Yes, it also means that at first, to name the invention, they used the terms that exist already, and so referring to the engravings or the art or the drawings, and also when you say, for example, retina, it refers to your body. So it needed some anchor to something that exists, but by developing a little by little the inventions, they figured out that you cannot continue like that, and you should actually invent also the term. and that's how they entered in the neology phase, which is photography, photology, physotography, physototype, etc., which is all
really beautiful words as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
and
which
just
is all a combination of Greek words.
And photography literally means like writing with light, which is really beautiful concept that it comes from like écriture, like writing.
Yeah.
When we were doing this research on these words, did you have one that you preferred more than photography?
I confess that I really liked the word rétine, because it's like you take in the image on yourself, and making it part of your body, and I think that the very the photography in its extreme is making an image part of your body. Like photography has always been taking an image of the outside world of yourself, but and making that image reflected inside a camera obscura. It's always kind of analogy of taking in the image inside of you, and that was the first. So retina was the first word used by Niépce, but I think there is something very essential in the photography in that word.
I had my favorite like term for photography it's also from Daido Moriyama, and he has a lovely phrase. He calls photograph a fossil of light and time, which is really a lovely idea. I love the idea of a fossil. Like a fossil is something which is kind of made, fixed in place. It was like an animal that was moving around and it's fixed, stuck. So the idea of a fossil of light and time is, I always thought it's a very beautiful way to describe what a photograph does. And if we talk about, because I'm trying to make some connections always to your work, if we think about the idea of a fossil, fossils are things which usually stay undiscovered, like frozen underground for a long time. And there's quite a part of your work, before we move on to talk about the exhibition that you have now, there's quite a part of your work which deals with kind of finding previously existing photographic plates or photographic objects, and then you make them into images, almost as if you released them from their hiding place. I wonder if you could talk about some of those earlier work.
So it's a series of work that I call the Immaculate, and it's a group. It's a series of plates that are very old. They are made in 1850s, so they are about 170 years old, and they were supposed to use as a daguerreotype. And
a metal plate, then. Yeah,
it's a metal plate. So it's a daguerreotype. Daguerreotype is first commercialized photographic process invented in France, and so the support is copper plate but silvered. So the surface is very mirrored, and it was commonly used in the 1850s, and I had the chance to have some unused daguerreotype. So this work was about to.
I it had never been put in a camera. It had never been put
No.
inside the camera obscura.
No. So this one is like so it should have been used in one moment, but in some reasons it was unused, and so I put it. So I wanted to enlarge it.
Mm-hmm.
So originally it's very small, but I wanted to make it big so that we can feel, so that we can see more of the details of the plate. Because what's interesting in these plates is that you can see the trace of passing time, because so each plates are very different. Yes, and you can see some oxidation trace, or it can be a trace of moisture. It can be simply the reaction of the metal, but I wanted to show more that it's as if the 170 years of time passing was condensed in one plate.
Yeah.
And it's also the accumulation of potential of images that are condensed in one plate.
So in actual fact, it looks like kind of Mark Rothko style abstract painting or something, but in actual fact, you haven't done anything to it. You've simply photographed it yourself as it exists, and then made it larger. So that it's a kind of, we call like a latent thing. It hasn't ever been used. It's kind of, is that where the idea immaculate comes from?
Yes, because but at the same time it's contradictory, because it's immaculate, but there are so many layers of time, and all the possible images that could have been taken that are into it.
It's really interesting to me, because this idea of the photograph in general is used to explore or to explain the idea of the index, like the idea of something that registers traces of something. When we normally take a picture, it's an index of a moment, or an index of 1/25 of a second if you have a very fast camera. In this case, it's done the same job, but it's done it over 170 years. So it's registered time in a totally different way.
Yes, I think it's also about some choices that you have to make when you make a photograph, because when you want to make an image, you always have to choose one moment and one precise place, and also you have to have your camera with you when you want to take an image. And so it's lots of elements that you have to make a decision. But at the same time, when you make a decision, it's also a decision not to choose the rest of it.
Yeah.
So when you don't want to make a decision, that's what happens in this image.
Just for those people who haven't seen these works, I've seen these works exhibited. I'm lucky because I've seen them on the wall. They're very mysterious. They're very strange things that almost look like they have ghosts in them, and you can sometimes see like brush strokes or fingerprints or some things that make you feel that there's somebody has been there. You definitely have a feeling of this, right?
Yeah.
you can see how the chemicals were put on, or you can see how somebody's touched the surface somewhere. They're quite mysterious things.
Yes, and also the surface is very mirroring. So sometimes you can see yourself inside.
Yeah.
So that's also
that's another photograph that didn't get made. The portrait of yourself, which is in the surface of the daguerreotype. So these works we've been talking about, they all relate to this very early moment with the kind of early materials like metal, chemicals, even the material of naming photography. Do you want to talk about the works you've been making recently for the exhibition in the Japan Society? Because it's got many connections with this. In this case, something which is almost the first one, like imaginary landscapes. It's almost as if you've found some. I'm going back to this idea of the world taking a picture of itself, or spontaneous image making. Can you explain to people exactly what they're looking at? Because they may not know.
Yes.
What this wonderful abstract painting we're looking at.
So this pink kind of landscape, it's a series called Untitled, and it's made out of Eastman lantern slide plates. So so
maybe not even know what is a magic lantern slide. You may have to tell people what it is. Yeah.
So it's like a PowerPoint slide.
Well, it's like a projector. So they had
the PowerPoint slide 100 years ago. So
except it's glass normally, right?
Yeah, so it's glass, and so it's heavy, but so people should have reproduced the image on those kinds of plates, but it was stored somewhere, and I bought them like 2 years ago when I was in Rochester, and when I opened the package in the dark, I saw that the color was very interesting.
Do you know, Hanako? Do you know why the color is? Why is it so pink? Is the color?
Anti-halo.
Okay.
So it's to prevent to have a bizarre effect when you shoot a light.
Okay.
So that was a product to prevent that. And but normally it should be a black and white slide. So the end image, the final image, will become black and white. But you can have color before that. So when you wash it, it will disappear. So it's kind of a color that only the people who are developing the plates can see.
So it would have been something which was the pink colors would have been inside the chemical process, but not intended to be visible.
No.
So normally you'd never be able to see this yellow and pink and blue. They weren't trying to make colored images at all.
No.
Yeah.
So I go back and so I have also those mountains.
Yeah. Well, obviously you need to tell people they're not really mountains, right? They do look like mountains, but they're obviously not mountains. So can you explain how these two mountains came to be?
Yeah. So those sorry, it's so I made them. So the papers also previously unused for almost 100 years, and it's a paper called.
Just before you go on, where do you find 100-year-old unused paper?
This one, this specific one, I bought in a village in France.
Okay.
Where, Bièvre. It's,
okay. So
you have a special market.
In a sort of flea market or something? Or?
Yeah, it's a market specialized in old photography.
Wow, okay. And so you bought the paper in the market, and then afterwards, what did you do?
So when I opened the package, I find some recipe how to develop the paper. So I buy the chemical and develop it. But at the same time, I found the texture of the paper very interesting. So I haven't put it.
People would have the people who use these, you called it a recipe, so people would have not been able to buy the right chemicals. You'd have to go off and mix your own chemicals to produce it, right?
Yes. So it's like a kitchen. You have your equipment and chemical and do it yourself. So
it's like a kind of a hobby for people in this time, or it's a professional?
I think so. Yeah.
And could you find the ingredients for your recipe even today?
Yeah, because it's kind of very so it's always combination of basic chemicals. So it's not when it becomes more recent, it becomes more complicated. Yeah. Like when there is color films, etc., you will have thousands of chemicals, and you cannot deal with it. But in the very beginning of photographic industry, you can still deal with it.
So you could make your own recipe, and you could. So, but you didn't put this in the camera and take a picture. What did you do?
So I soaked into the chemical bath, but not entirely, but in a way that it can make you some landscape like this, and I found it very fun.
And just so people can get an idea, they're quite tiny pieces of paper, right?
Yeah.
So it's really like a little, almost like a little notebook page rather than a big photograph. Yeah.
So, and also, so my other series.
Oh yeah, this is like the kind of.
So when you click on it, it will super zoom on it. But so
people can do this. They can go to the Japan Society website, and they can go and look at your work much more closely, like we're doing now. Yeah.
And those ones are. So when you click on it, it will become bigger than natural. So. So it's even better than seeing the originals. That's what it is. A little weird, but also very nice. And those ones are very special. It's not a plate, and it's not a paper either. It's like in the middle of those two different kinds.
Like a sort of early version of a negative or something like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a product that's called the Fitch Negative Xylonite films. And it's kind of an ancestor of film materials, but very inflammable. And it existed maybe for 2 years or something like that. So it's very niche period, and so
and go on, sorry.
Yeah, so those ones I just developed it,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so much damaged by the time that it has those very stormy traces.
That's what I was going to say. Actually, it's interesting because you haven't done anything. You've simply revealed what's happened to the surface of the negative. But in fact, we can't help seeing something like it looks like a landscape or like the sky at night or some clouds or something. We can't help but look at it. To me, sometimes it looks like the side of a fish, like very close up side of some kind of strange underwater creature. It's very mysterious, huh?
Yeah, and so that was the zero need film, and then there is another one. So there are also another mountains, and those ones are Agfa Brovilla. So it's more recent kind of papers, but you can see it's a kind of brownish tonality, and I made lots of those kinds. Maybe I should maybe I will explain that this series I was making during the first lockdown here in Paris, and I was making them all in my bathroom, and
that's a good traditional photographer's place to work in.
Yeah. It's yeah. I'm respecting the tradition, and I thought it was very nice way to spend my lockdown, because in a way it's a kind of a voyage to make those mountains. So that's why I wanted to entitle Imaginary Landscape, because you can make prairies and mountains and fogs, and it all comes in in those plates or papers that has the possibility of making another image in the past, but finally revealing those things in my bathroom. I found it very fun.
You never know exactly what you're going to get from each piece of paper, right?
No.
And can you because we don't have endless amount of time, but can you tell us about the other series in the show, because you have actually 2 other series, right, in this?
Even 3 other series.
Yeah.
So this is a second one called Palpebra, and I was making this out of all the wrappings of the photographic materials.
Oh wow! So when you're moving the cursor, it's showing you the different ones, right?
Yeah. So first I wrote a poem, and it's a poem about eyelid, because since we were also talking earlier about the notion of retina as a photography, but so I was like, if I push this thinking further, maybe the wrapping of a photography, if the photography is a retina, maybe the wrapping is an eyelid.
Yeah, it basically protects the surface of the retina from light, stopping light from going in, right?
So I took photographs of each wrappings of old materials and wanted to consider as an eyelid. So I wrote that text and referred to each lines an image of a packaging. And here, for example, you can see on the bottom you can see part of the recipe.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. So you see, it's very simple. It's a very basic chemical.
Sometimes they look a bit like old medicine packets, don't they? They have a
kind of yeah, exactly.
Chemical kind of feeling, as if it was like some kind of medicine or chemical packing.
Yes.
But they're very beautiful too.
And
so did you keep all of these things? You have a collection of them?
Yes, and those ones are only part of it. I have loads of
yeah. Oh, they're beautiful. It's a beautiful collection, in fact, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I like them.
Yeah.
So this one was palpebra, and then I have the film reels. And so those ones, basically, it's the same idea with those plates or papers, but I did the same thing with film reels because I bought also previously unused films. So I developed them as they are, and usually.
Where are the different colors coming from? Is that just the chemicals that you used, or?
It's also about the color, the inherent color of that film is different also.
Okay. But they're very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so some of them come from France, from Pathé, or Kodak of the United States, or Givers from Belgium. And so they all have different compounds. And usually, so the people at that period, they were using special projectors. Like, for example, for the Pathé Baby, you have a special Pathé Baby projector. But since I don't have one in my house, well, I wish I had, but it was during confinement, and so I did it in a very bricolage way. And
they're very, very beautiful. They kind of remind me of Stan Brakhage or something like this. It's kind of experimental, very like a medium-specific kind of cinema, experimental cinema. If you were showing these in an exhibition, what would you project them onto the wall? Would you project them bigger? Would they be kind of big projections, or would they be small?
I don't know. I think both can work because
in your practice work, you've made bigger scale versions of things, right?
Yeah, it can be I think both can work, and it can have a different effect because when you do it bigger, it's so immersive that it will enhance the aspect of a illusion that fails to be an illusion.
Yeah, no, exactly. But they're very beautiful. They're very hypnotic. They're almost like kind of hypnotizing, this kind of idea.
Yeah, because you almost feel like a movement, but actually it's not, and that's part of the trick.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes, so that was the film reels, and then one thing I forgot to mention is that so one of them, I think this one, is Kodak film, but military. So it was intended to be used for war, and but were never used. So for this one, I know the context, how it was made, and that will explain more about the potential that film was having.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my Magic Lantern series. So I was making those kinds of landscapes on those previously unused glass plates, well, photographic glass plates. And then I was putting them and reflecting some sunlight on it, so that you can have the scenery that you see on the plate, but also the actual landscapes that are reflecting on the surface of the plate. So it becomes kind of a double reflected landscape, and I thought it's kind of paying homage to those magic lanterns, because originally they were used to project sceneries from very far countries. So I thought it was a very nice tribute to make, especially during this period.
Since you've discovered all of these incredible new materials during the confinement, and you've been working kind of by yourself, I guess, on all these things, what do you plan to do once the world go back a bit more to normal? What will you do with all of this material? Are you working on an exhibition or a book, like a physical outcome?
I think I just continue what I'm doing, and I really enjoyed making those 4 series that I was already working on, but by putting onto the website of the Japan Society, it allowed me to really make it concrete. And also, as you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, there is my interest towards the work of Niépce, and all those works about those lost works of Niépce. I also want to make them real, like not only making the box, but making also the content. Like it wouldn't mean that I want to fill the box, but to make it like tangible. So I think I will. Well, I already started, and but I was doing also this kind of work with Talbot. So doing experiments of Talbot, but I think I want to redo all the experiments by Niépce.
So you're going to do an amazing piece of historical reconstruct the history of photography.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and I think there is a lot of potentials that are unexplored of how a photography can look like, and I think, yeah, there are a lot more to do in that direction.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing, I'm sure everybody does look forward to seeing all of that developing in the future. Thank you so much, Hanako. Thank you so much for the talk.
Thank you to you, Simon.